Hey guys, this is the Practical Christianity Podcast. I am Dale Tedder, and thank you so much for joining me. Uh, I think the last episode I shared that I was going to be doing something called Kingdom Rhythms, and we would be walking through the church year. And although it's Sunday, January 4th, this is the first time I've been in the office to be able to do the next episode. So we're a little behind right now. My goal is to catch up. And also, it's not going to be every single day that I do this Kingdom Rhythms church year um, format. I have other things that I want to share along the way, and we'll knock those out as well. But this is called a New Year in the Story. And it's interesting because it's a scripture that I have shared actually on podcast and video a number of times. It's really near and dear to my heart. So I hope that you'll get some mileage out of it as well. It may be very familiar to many of you as well. So this really is the one for January 1st, but I hope that if you're listening to this or watching this, you'll get as much from it as you would if you were listening to it on January 1st. And let's be honest, uh, how many of us were watching, football on January 1st versus watching videos on my website? Probably very few. So this is timely. Anyway, uh, this is based on Psalm 90, verses 12 through 17. So listen to this. These are just an excerpt from verses 12 through 17, but I encourage you to go back and read Psalm 90, read the whole thing, and then read 12 through 17 in particular. Psalm 90 is sometimes called sort of the Psalm of old age, I guess is what you could say. And I feel like I just turned 60, so I feel like I'm fitting more and more into that. So here is Psalm 90, 12 through 12 and 17. And this is a psalm by Moses, by the way. And he says, "So teach us to number our days that we may get or gain a heart of wisdom." You've heard me share that before. And then he says this, which I don't often share: "Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands uh, upon us." And yes, establish the work of our hands. So I kind of mangled that last verse. Let me read that again. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. So that is Psalm 90, verses 12 and 17. So where are we in the story right now? Well, January 1 is the same as today, and that is we are in the season of Christmas. And the season of Christmas are the 12 days when we celebrate the incarnation, the thing that we think we only celebrate on Christmas Day. Well, there's 12 days of that. We celebrate the incarnation when the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, when Jesus was born, took human flesh, and dwelt among us. And what we learn from that is that God did not abandon his creation. Instead, he entered into it. And this is Act 3 of the cosmic story. And I shared that with you last time. What are the four acts of the cosmic story, of God's story? That meta narrative that I referred to last time. Well, it's creation, and then it's fall, when we fall into sin, fall in rebellion and alienation, and all the rest. We become broken. We weren't created that way, but we became that way through the fall. And then there's redemption, and God begins that work right away, where he begins prophesying the coming of the Messiah, the anointed one, the Christ. And then, of course, the fulfillment of that in the fullness of time, which actually we'll talk about in another episode. And then consummation, or you could say reclamation or restoration. I like consummation, but it's the consummation of all things, where everything that Christ has been working for, making all things new, comes to its fullness at the consummation of all things. And so those are the four acts, I guess you could say, of this grand story. So this episode, representing January 1st, is a day when we mark our calendars by another way. We always think of a New Year's Day. I grew up black-eyed peas, New Year's Day, college football, visiting family, friends, a great time. And we think of, a new year starting, turning over a new leaf, new opportunities, all the stuff that we normally think of. And that's the way we kind of mark our calendars. And it's a year of fresh starts, or at least the beginning of a year of fresh starts. And so we make resolutions and then we quickly break resolutions. And so here we are standing at the beginning or the threshold, and we look back at what was and we look forward to what might be. And so the question that I want to kind of set before us in this particular devotion is, what does it mean to begin a new year as people who live in God, inside God's story? What does it mean to begin a new year as people who live inside of God's story? So we turn to Moses in Psalm 90, and here's how Moses approaches this idea. He wasn't celebrating January 1st because it wasn't such a thing then, but he prays, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Now, I want to talk about something I don't usually talk about with regard to this text, and it's really important. And so I think I'll mention it now. Here's what Moses does not say. He doesn't say, count your days like an accountant tallying figures, but number them. In other words, number them or see them clearly. Feel the weight of your finite amount of days you have left. Understand the brevity of the time you have left. Really grasp that. That's what Moses is saying. Moses knew something that we often forget every January, and that is we don't have an infinite amount of New Year's coming up. All right? We have no infinite amount of time to continue growing in this life. We do not have an endless supply of days to waste on trivialities and to spend in distractions, which inevitably cause us to begin to drift. Every sunrise, you could say, is a gift, and we really ought to appreciate it, kind of enjoy it as though it were your last one. Now, we don't want to be pessimistic and think it is every single, sunrise, but we need to also be realistic and say, hey, it could be. I want to live this day as though it were my last day, live it for the glory of God, and enjoy all of this, live in gratitude, live in humility, live in joy, seek to do God's will as though I had 1,000 days left or 1,000 years left, but knowing that this could be the last day. So every breath, someone has said, is borrowed. I like that idea. Every breath is borrowed. Every moment is an opportunity to love God. I like that also. Every opportunity or every moment is an opportunity to love God. It's an opportunity to love our neighbor and to live faithfully in whatever sphere or spheres that God has placed you. And again, this is not morbid. It's just realistic. I mean, it just is. I know some people don't like the phrase, it is what it is, but it is what it is in this case. And that's the path to wisdom, actually. That's the path to growing in the skill or the art and the skill of living life well. Because when you truly grasp that your days are numbered, not in some far-off theoretical sense, but in that kind of deep in your soul, bone-deep awareness that this life is short and eternity is long. If you believe that, I mean, even if you don't believe it, it's true. But especially if you believe it, you really need to embrace that idea. Life is short, eternity is long, and that changes everything. Priorities begin to clarify when you understand that. Distractions begin to lose their grip. They begin to lose their power. And you stop living reactively. And I think you start living more intentionally once you have this very realistic way of understanding the brevity of time. And the Bible is replete with examples or outright teaching about that. When you understand this, you begin to ask different questions. You start saying things like, what am I building? Where am I investing my time? Where am I investing my energy? Where am I or who am I pouring my heart into? Will this matter will this matter a year from now? Have you ever thought about that? Is what I'm doing now, will that matter a year from now, or is it only important in this moment? How about 10 years from now? How about 100 years from now? Will anyone even know that I was around and did this? Now, that doesn't mean all the things we do lose significance just because someone may not know about it 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 years from now. But it does give us reason to say, am I investing in eternity? Am I investing in people who are eternal beings? Am I investing in the kingdom of God? Am I proclaiming the gospel, the word of God, things that they do not have a shelf life? They not only can impact whoever it is you may be talking to and investing in, but it's also something that enables you to say, hey, and they in turn might do the same to another generation, and they in turn may do it to another generation. Or maybe you are a writer and you might put pen to paper and write something that will endure for generations. Or I don't know how long we can expect videos in social media to last, but when you leave something, for example, like this, who knows how long this will last? It may get 20 views, it may get 2 views, or who knows what God may do with it. It's really not something I need to care about. I just need to be faithful in the process, and so do you with whatever it is God is calling you to do. So, what we want to ask is, and this is a sobering question, is that when I stand before God, will I be glad that I spent myself, that I spent my time, my effort, my energy, my creativity? Will this be something when I stand before Christ, I'll be glad I did? I think it is for me with the things that I am doing, but I know that there are things I'm being lazy in, that I'm not pursuing, ideas that I've had that I doubt, I'm insecure about some things, and that's not coming from God. If you feel God's calling you to do something, then do it. Whether it's pouring yourself into others by mentoring those who need help and discipling them, sharing the gospel, pursuing justice and mercy, whatever it may be, it's important. It's important to God, and I think that sort of thing has long lasting, as Maximus said in Gladiator, it echoes in eternity. And I think that's a big deal as well. So this is what I think wisdom looks like. Wisdom is not about clever strategies. It's not about the newest, latest, and greatest life hack. But wisdom is seeing life from God's perspective and to order your days accordingly. But here's the deal. Moses doesn't stop with brevity. Here's how he ends this prayer. He says, establish the work of our hands. Establish the work of our hands. So notice and really pay attention to what he's asking. He's not asking, Lord, bless my plans. And he's not saying, Lord, make us successful by the world's standards. He's saying, Lord, establish the work of our hands. In other words, I pray that this is something that is in alignment with your way, your will, your word, your character, and therefore make it solid, make it last. Long after I'm gone, long after I have slipped into obscurity, let this work be established by your hands. Continue to grow it. Let it turn into something by the grace of your spirit. Make it count for something beyond this vapor of a life that we are in right now. And I think that's the prayer of someone who knows that they are part of a larger, greater story than your own individual story. Moses led Israel for 40 years, but poor Moses did not get to enter into the promised land. However, his work outlived him. His work outlived him. His faithfulness mattered not because he saw the final outcome, but because God established it. Now, Moses certainly did not slip into obscurity. Moses' name has been remembered for thousands of years, and we still read and devote ourselves to learn and grow and practice much of what he taught. So he's clearly not somebody who has faded away. But it's not because he was able to see the fruit of what he sought to be faithful in doing, but God was faithful. And God brought forth the increase. God brought forth the fruit. God did the heavy lifting, as I like to put it. The faithfulness of Moses did not matter because he saw the final outcome, but again, because God established it. And here's, I think, where we find ourselves at the beginning of a new year. And this is really important. This is going to sound trite. It's going to sound like been there, heard that, you know. But really, in light of what I've just said, please hear this. You are not responsible for outcomes. You are not responsible for outcomes. You are responsible for faithfulness. Not outcomes, but faithfulness. God does not call you to transform the culture single handedly. God does not ask you to fix your family overnight. God does not call you to revolutionize your workplace in a week or in a month. He calls you to show up. He calls you to do the next right thing, which means you have to do the first right thing or the previous right thing, then do the next right thing, and to be faithful one step at a time in whatever sphere of life that God has placed you, whether it's at your kitchen table, whether it's at your office, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's on your little league team, whether it's with a group of friends, whether it's in your church. You plant, you water, God gives growth. You build and you work, but God establishes it. That's important. We participate in this, okay? Now, we shouldn't get big heads because we're participating. However, we should be humbled that God would use us, that God would call us to be a part of his grand story of what he's doing. That's pretty humbling, I think. So we plant and we water, but God brings the growth. We build, we work, but God establishes it, or he doesn't. That's something to consider. God establishes it, or he doesn't, but it's all going to be according to his purposes. Our job is simply, and there's nothing simple about it, but our job is obedience, and God's job is outcome. Okay? God brings forth the outcome. So here's what it means to begin a new year as kingdom people. We don't start with resolutions, we start with worship. In fact, we just had worship here at my church. We acknowledge that this year is not in our control. Despite despite what we might want, it's not in our control. It belongs to God. We exist inside God's story and not the other way around. And our lives and our work and our families and our struggles and all of it matters because we are part of what God is doing in history. That's why it matters. We're part of God's story. We're part of what God is doing. God is doing the work in us and through us. And so someone has said it this way, we cannot do it without God, and God will not do it without us. Now, could God do it without us? Absolutely. But he chooses to make us a part of his plan, to make us participants in what he's doing. And I just think that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool. So what's important for us to remember here is we don't go around chasing novelty. We pursue faithfulness. The world, and really, frankly, a lot of Christians will go around saying, hey, this needs to be your breakthrough year. This needs to be your best year yet. And look, I don't want to be overly cynical. There's nothing wrong with wanting to break through and reach goals that you've set for yourself. I'm all about that. And I would love for this to be my best year. In fact, I pray that, Lord, let this be my best year. But not in some sense of human success. But I want to do this for the sake of the kingdom, for the glory of God, for his honor, that his name would be magnified, that others would be blessed. That is what I want my year to be, not, to get more credit and more fame, or whatever that even means, for somebody who gets about 6 views a day. So, this is not the fast track to stardom, all right? But that doesn't matter. I'm going to be faithful for God. That's what matters. The kingdom, I've mentioned this before, operates entirely differently than what we're used to. Faithfulness looks so ordinary. It looks like showing up day after day after day. It's all about loving the same people, and it involves going through a lot of the same struggles. It involves doing your work with integrity when no one else is looking, no one else is paying attention. It's about praying when you feel like your prayers are just bouncing off the ceiling and nothing's happening. This is how the kingdom advances. This is how God has chosen to extend or to advance his kingdom, not in these great dramatic leaps. There may be things like that from time to time, but those are the exceptions. That's not the ordinary way in which things happen. It happens through daily obedience. We don't live as if this life is infinite. We number our days, we trust God, and so we do not become anxious and we do not become frantic. We do become intentional. And we ask questions like, where is God calling me to invest myself and invest this year? What needs to change? Where am I being selfish? Where am I being rebellious or resistant to God's call in my life? What do I need to submit to him, and where do I need to invest myself into this year? So what needs to say? What needs to stay? What am I doing well? I need to continue going, continue doing, and maybe even continue to improve. And then what do I need to let go of? What is just not bearing fruit? Um, and then we get to rest. We get to rest, and we don't rest in the same way the world rests. We don't just collapse into a heap of exhaustion, seeking to escape into distraction. We rest, this is really important. We rest in the confidence that our faith matters, even when, or maybe even especially when, we can't see the results. There was I think he was a Dutch theologian. I don't think he was German, but he could have been German. But his name was Gerhard Grote. And this guy, he lived and died in obscurity. I mean, we know about him because things were written about him and with some of the people he associated with. But he left a legacy that he never got to see and that he was never recognized for in his life. And as people learn about that, I know it was true for me. I mean, it revolutionized my life. And I began to start praying, Lord, let me live in obscurity. But I do pray that you would use what I'm doing for your glory and let it advance your kingdom and let it be a blessing in generations yet to come in whatever way he wants. I think that's really important. So we rest in knowing that God is the one who is writing the story, and we're just privileged to be a part of it. So I don't know what this year holds for you, and guess what? You don't either. There will be joys that you can't possibly imagine, and there will be sorrows that you did not anticipate, and that's just life. And I'm not making light of that. That's just reality. We just don't know what this year holds. I mean, I hope that there are more joys and more highs than there are lows and opportunities for grieving and things like that. But we don't know. There will be areas where we do break through. We have victory, and there will be there will be setbacks. There'll be failures. There will be moments of clarity, and there will be long stretches of fog. So here's what I do know, because that's what I don't know. Here's what I do know is that you're not alone, and that you are not adrift, and you are not living a random, meaningless existence. You are part of the church. The church is part of the kingdom. The kingdom is part of God's plan to make all things new. Okay, that's not going to be the only time you hear that. You are part of the church. The church is part of the kingdom. The kingdom is part of what God is doing to make all things new. And every day you are given, every conversation that you're given, every task, every small act of obedience, that is a thread of something larger, God's story. So as you step into this new year, you don't have to chase after everything the culture says you need to chase after. You don't need to have everything the culture says you need to have. You don't need to. I know you might want to make a list of resolutions, but make them something God honoring. I mean, yeah, you can, I want to get in better shape. I want to read more books. That's all good stuff. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm just saying get the big picture in mind of what God is doing and how you can be a part of that. Teach me to number my days, give me wisdom, establish the work of my hands. That's a pretty good prayer. That's a prayer of Moses, and it's a prayer that we probably ought to pray every day. And then after that, what do? You show up, you do the next right thing, you try to be faithful where you are, and you trust that God in his kindness will make it count. So after that, what we do is we just keep going day after day after day. And I encourage you, if you're watching this on the website, you may already know that this is a written devotion, and there are some reflection questions. Um, there's an action step. There is a prayer at the end. So you can find that on the website. It came out January 1st. Today is the 4th. Not sure when this is coming out, whether it'll come out today or tomorrow, but go check out January 1st and you can read all this again. I added a bunch of stuff that wasn't in the written version because I just can't help myself. But I hope that I hope this will be a great year for you. But I hope it will be a year where you really grow in having God's eternal perspective and you can pursue the things that last, that are meaningful, that glorify and honor God, and that will be a wonderful blessing to others. So, Happy New Year. Um, Happy Christmas season to you, and I look forward to being with you next time.